We are now 9 days away from the first game of the NFL season, which means the fantasy community is in the midst of drafts. In today's video, we'll be running through my final tight end rankings and tiers for this offseason to help you make the best draft decisions. For those of you that have already drafted, let these rankings be a reference for you to seek validation on your decisions. Don't forget that as a bonus, I will be sharing some sleepers at the end of this video. And after you're done here, be sure to head to the description for my running back and wide receiver rankings. So let's dive into tier one. I have tier one labeled as league winners to keep things uniform across every position, but you can't really classify tight ends as league winners. This is more so for running backs and receivers, but you can no doubt give yourself a major advantage over your league mates by having an elite tight end. And the tight ends in this tier give you that clear advantage by having the realistic potential to finish as the number one tight end in fantasy. So the top three tight ends have been pretty obvious throughout the summer, and those guys are Brock Bowers, Trey McBride, and George Kittle. I'm not a big believer in taking tight ends in the first 6 rounds of fantasy drafts, but if you're going to draft a tight end in the first 3 rounds, Bowers and McBride are home run picks at the tight end position. Bowers was the tight end 1 in PPR last season as a rookie, and there's a very high chance he repeats this season as the top tight end. McBride was the tight end 2 in PPR last year with only 13 less points than Bowers, playing in 1 less game. But most impressively with McBride, he did this catching only 2 touchdowns. So I fully expect the Cardinals to give McBride more red zone looks this season, and he should have more than 2 touchdowns. You'd at least think so. So he belongs right there with Bowers with a really high chance to be the tight end 1 in fantasy. And if you're going to take a tight end after these 2 in the first 4 rounds, the only guy worth taking is George Kittle. So George Kittle was actually the tight end 1 in standard scoring formats last season while playing in only 15 games. So I fully expect Kittle to flirt with a top 3 tight end finish once again this season on a Niners team that is projected to win 11 to 12 games with the easiest schedule in the league by a mile. So that's it for tier 1. We'll move on to tier 2. And tier 2, you should still expect these tight ends to produce at a high level, and these guys have the realistic potential to finish as top 5 tight ends this season in fantasy. And first up, we have Sam Laporta. I think Sam Laporta is at least 1 step up from the rest of the guys in this tier. He was kind of disappointing last year, finishing as a tight end 9, but only 2 seasons ago as a rookie, he finished as a tight end 1. We've seen the elite upside with him in his rookie season, and I fully expect the Lions to further involve their young tight end in the offense this season, which should land him into a top 5 finish at the end of the season. Next up is Travis Kelce. Trust me, it's extremely difficult for me to include him in this tier, but there are some things in my research I simply can't ignore. He still finished as a tight end 5 last year in PPR, averaging 12.2 points per game. He also had a 3-week stretch where he put up 20 plus points. A lot of that had to do with Rashee Rice being out with injury and the lack of playmakers for Patrick Mahomes in the passing game. But we're likely going to see Rashee Rice miss at least 4 games this season due to a suspension, which means at least in those 4 games, Kelce's going to see a high number of targets. And that could be 4 games, 6 games, we don't know. And on top of that, Kelce is still one of the greatest tight ends to ever play and is the favorite target of the best quarterback in the NFL. So he will have production that could very likely put him in the top 5. Furthermore, to my surprise, my fantasy projections have him finishing as the 4th tight end in PPR and 6th tight end in standard scoring. I'm still fading Kelce in all my drafts, but my projections are typically very telling. And speaking of those projections, I appreciate you watching this video to gain that winning edge this season, but let me help you even more. My fantasy football draft guide is now available to the public. This guide has all my rankings, projections, and so much more. Let me do the work for you and provide you with the players you should be betting the house on and guys that we should not be drafting. As a computer scientist, I've created advanced AI and machine learning models on top of my countless hours of research that could give you the winning edge this season. So secure a guide by emailing me, messaging me on X, or just commenting down below. The price you pay today is the price you lock in for the rest of your life. So as I increase the price as this channel grows and I introduce new models, you always pay what you pay today. And since this is the first summer of Yam Talks, I'll be giving out 1 guide every video for the rest of the summer. All you have to do is subscribe, like this video, and tell us in the comments who you think will be the number 1 tight end in fantasy this season. And a week from today, I'll choose a winner from your comments. So the final player in this tier is TJ Hawkinson. I was a little hesitant to include Hawk here because of the knee injury he suffered in 2023 and the uncertainty around this Vikings offense with JJ McCarthy. but I'm going to give Hawk and Kevin O'Connell the benefit of the doubt to produce another top 5 finish at the position. We saw Hawk do this 3 out of 4 seasons between 2020 and 2023, so we know he's more than capable. Next up, we're going to move on to tier 3. In tier 3, we have a bunch of guys who are very high upside tight ends that I've been heavily targeting in my drafts. You can get most of these guys after the first 6 rounds, and I'd be extremely confident entering the season if any of these players were my starting tight end. So we'll kick it off with Mark Andrews. With Isaiah likely set to miss a few weeks with a broken bone in his foot, we should expect Mark Andrews to receive a ton of opportunities. Yeah, he's old, but he's still one of Lamar's favorite targets. He caught 11 touchdowns last year, which was the most out of all the tight ends in the NFL, and that was also the most out of all Ravens receivers. And that resulted in a tight end 6 finish for Mark Andrews last season on a Ravens team that was honestly looking to run the ball more than passing it, and that was with a 2 tight end set with Isaiah Likely. And then next up is Evan Ingram. So if you've been consuming my content throughout the summer, you know that I had Ingram in my top 6 all summer, but I think I've been coming down to earth just a bit on him. I think he's still going to be a top 10 fantasy tight end this season on what should be a dynamic Broncos offense that does lack established receiving threats outside of Courtland Sutton. But I just haven't been scooping him up in the 7th and 8th rounds when he's available in my drafts because of the other high upside options that are available at other positions. In some weird way, that makes me think he's not really one of my guys. And don't let that stop you from drafting him. He's still a very strong member of this tier, but I've just lowered him in my rankings by 2 or 3 spots. And sticking to the theme of vets, next up we got David Njoku. So David Njoku was averaging the 4th most points a game at the position last season, a whopping 13.5 PPR points. So look for one of the most athletically gifted receivers at the position to have another top 12 finish. But I think his ceiling is capped around that tight end 8 area due to the inevitable QB carousel we're going to see in Cleveland this season with Shador with Dillon Gabriel and Joe Flacco. And then now we have one of my favorite tight end targets in recent drafts, and that's Tucker Kraft. Tucker Kraft is a gem of a pick in the 10th round. We saw him finish at the tight end 11 in his sophomore season. If you want the full detailed breakdown of why you should be targeting him, check out my video on 5 tight ends to target in your fantasy drafts. That video will do him way more justice than me trying to spit out a few facts and tidbits here in a short amount of time. And next up, we'll move on to Zach Ertz. Zach Ertz was a big surprise at the tight end position last year, finishing as a tight end 7. The Commanders awarded him with a 1-year deal for this upcoming season, and backup Ben Sinnott, who had a lot of hype last year, has been a no factor for this team, so I definitely expect Ertz to handle tight end 1 responsibilities. I don't think he finishes as high as tight end 7 again, but there's definitely top 12 potential here for him on a dynamic Commanders offense. And lastly, finish this tier up with the high upside rookie in Tyler Warren. All throughout the offseason, all throughout the pre-draft process, Tyler Warren has been my favorite tight end in this year's class. He is a phenomenal athlete who is dominant at Penn State. In his senior year, he put up 1,200 plus receiving yards, 8 receiving touchdowns, on top of 200 plus rushing yards and 4 rushing touchdowns. I did not have him this high in my rankings at the start of the summer, but everything has been trending in the right direction for him this summer in training camp and preseason. And with Danny Dimes getting the nod at quarterback for Indy, I think we can see a very fun season for the first round rookie. So wrapping up tier 3 there, we'll move on to tier 4. Tier 4, these are guys that are capable of being starters for your fantasy team, and they're going to have weeks where they're one of the best players at the position, but they're also going to have weeks where they don't have elite production due to matchups or other factors. So I view these players as low-end tight end 1s or just solid tight end 2s. And if you're playing in 2 tight end leagues, these are players you want to target for that second slot. So we'll start with Dallas Goedert. I'm personally fading Dallas Goedert because he has not played more than 15 games in a season since 2021, and he's now 30 years old. On top of that, this Eagles offense has found its Super Bowl winning formula through running the ball, so the pass catchers in Philly kind of do suffer in terms of fantasy. But in the games Goddard does play, he is a top 10 option at the position. So if you draft him, just have some insurance. Don't draft him as your tight end 1 and not have a backup or a backup plan, especially in deeper leagues. And staying in the NFC East, now we have Jake Ferguson. I honestly really like Jake Ferguson. If you're adopting a late tight end strategy, you can get him around the 12th round, and he should be a steady fantasy option as long as Dak is healthy. This is also a contract year for Ferguson, and we so expect him to ball out, or at least try to ball out. And we did see him finish as the tight end 9 2 seasons ago. So we know that top 12 upside is there with Jake Ferguson. Our next rookie on this list is Colston Loveland. The Bears took him 10th overall with 100%. The Bears took him 10th overall, which 100% inflates his expectations as a rookie. There is very enticing upside here, considering he is attached to Ben Johnson and this young Bears offense. But I've been tampering my expectations a bit with Colston Loveland because there are a lot of mouths to feed in Chicago. This is Ben Johnson's first year as head coach, and Loveland is not the only NFL caliber tight end on this roster. Cole Kmet has been very solid throughout his young career, and he's still going to see the field. He's not going to be fully phased out of this offense. I still think Loveland is worth drafting for the upside, but have a second safer tight end, or be prepared for the possibility of having to stream a tight end if things don't start as expected for Colston Loveland. Next up is Jonnu Smith. This is the guy I really don't know what to expect from this season. While he was still a Dolphin, Vegas had his over-under on receiving yards tied for 8th out of all tight ends, and his touchdowns tied for 2nd with guys like Brock Bowers and Trey McBride. So I for sure expected that to change after the trade to Pittsburgh, considering they do have Pat Freiermuth there, who is a pretty quality tight end, but they've stayed the same. So according to Vegas, he's still poised to finish as a top 10 fantasy tight end this season, but I'm honestly not buying all that. That's why he is lower in my rankings. Still, he was a tight end 4 last season, even with Tua missing a ton of games. So this is a player I'm not involving myself with. I'd rather just be a bystander and see how his season plays out. And then a sleeper tight end target I absolutely love late in drafts this year is Brenton Strange. You can snag him at the end of your drafts in the final rounds. With Evan Ingram out of Jacksonville, the throne now belongs to Brenton Strange, who's entering his 3rd season in the NFL. Like Tucker Kraft, check out my top 5 tight ends to target video for an analysis that does him way more justice and the justice that he deserves. Next up is another young tight end. That's Cade Otton. Cade Otton, again, is a very promising young tight end who took a big step in his 3rd season in the NFL as a 600-yard tight end. He finished as a tight end 14 in PPR last year, averaging a solid 10 points in the 14 games he did play. The only knock against him is the number of high-quality options on Tampa's offense that are going to demand touches throughout the season. But now with McMillan and Chris Godwin expected to miss some time, we should see Otton be a strong tight end option at least over the first half of the season. And then next up, we have Mike Gesicki. Mike Gesicki was actually in my top 12, around that 10, 11, 12 slot, up until the Noah Fant signing for Cincy. His original position in my rankings was due to the upside he does possess, being a member of the Cincinnati Bengals offense, where we saw him finish as a tight end 13 last season. But Noah Fant being brought over kind of muddies the Gesicki waters, because I'd expect Cincy to get both these guys equalish playing time throughout the season. Noah Fant was the starter in Seattle last season, and he had a pretty respectable season. So I'm not confident that Gesicki carries the same fantasy upside I thought he had earlier in the season as a potential tight end 1. So next up, not going to waste my time with Kyle Pitts. Either he finally lives up to what he was drafted to be this season, or you can draft and you're going to draft him at a discount, or this ends up being the last season he enjoys riding that college Florida hype. So we'll see what happens with Kyle Pitts. I'm personally not involving myself. And next up, we have another guy who has a lot to prove this season. That's Dalton Kincaid. I won't draft Dalton Kincaid till I see him produce at the level he's expected to produce at. After all the hype entering last season, he finished as a tight end 29 in Josh Allen's MVP season. So I'm 100% drafting guys that are going around him, like Tucker Kraft, like Jake Ferguson, and like Zach Ertz. I'm personally not involving myself in Kincaid like Kyle Pitts. Those are both guys I just want to see what they do this year, and if I miss out on them this year, so be it. Next up is Hunter Henry. Hunter Henry has some strong appeal as a tight end 2 in fantasy this year. He's entering the season with a young, promising Drake May as his quarterback that does not have established wide receivers yet. And there is a very real possibility that early in the season, we see May target his veteran tight end heavily until those wide receivers actually emerge for New England. So if you're playing in 2 tight end leagues or in a deep, like 16-man league, Hunter Henry is a solid option late in drafts. Another veteran on a team lacking established wide receivers is Juwan Johnson. Juwan Johnson was a tight end 17 in PPR last season as a Saint, and the Saints gave him a bag this offseason, paying him $30 million over 3 years. When you pay a tight end that much money, you're gonna get him involved. And on a Saints team that is lacking offensive firepower at the receiver position, now Spencer Rattler has been announced as a starter, so I could 100% see Spencer Rattler view Juwan Johnson as a safety blanket in his young quarterback career in the NFL. So like Henry, I can see the tight end 2 appeal with Juwan Johnson. And then lastly, we have Chig Okonkwo. We really saw him heating up over the last 4 weeks of last season in Tennessee, in which he was the tight end 10 in fantasy. I like the upside here pairing the positive momentum he had at the end of last season with number 1 overall pick Cam Ward, who's looked pretty solid this summer. Chig is an interesting target in super deep leagues and especially in best ball drafts. And then finally, some sleepers who are all super cheap, super low risk investments in this year's draft. Just barely missing the cut was Elijah Arroyo, Seahawks rookie tight end. Seattle willing to release Noah Fant, their starter last season, tells me they're confident with giving their second round pick in this year's draft his opportunity as their tight end of the future. And I expect him to see a bunch of targets as a starting tight end, which could equate to fantasy production if the Seattle offense is even just solid as under Sam Darnold. And next up is Panthers second-year tight end Jatavion Sanders. JT Sanders is a very athletic tight end who showed some real flashes as a receiver in his rookie season in Carolina. Despite external analysis saying tight end was a position of need for Carolina, they didn't seem to feel that way. It's evident they're optimistic about the development of JT Sanders paired with the rise of Bryce Young. So I think he's a phenomenal target in best ball drafts as your third tight end, and you can get him literally in rounds like 19 and 20 of best ball drafts. Lastly, a name to keep an eye on as a streaming target later in the season is Darren Waller. I would not draft Darren Waller right now in redraft leagues. We don't know what things are looking like with him coming out of retirement and joining the Miami Dolphins. But if he can get his stuff figured out coming out of retirement and fill in to that Jonnu Smith role for Miami, he has the ability to definitely be a starting fantasy option. So keep an eye on Darren Waller. By midseason, we should know if he's going to be fantasy relevant or not. So those are my final tight end rankings for this offseason. Hopefully y'all found some gems in there. Let me know in the comments below if there's any players you agree with, disagree with, and keep an eye out for my final ranking video over the next few days for quarterbacks. And good luck with your drafts this season, and I'll catch y'all later.